A much-loved pub in the heart of Feakle, with roots going back to the late 19th century, has been put on the market, marking the end of an era for one Clare family. Bohan's pub is steeped in history, from generations of ownership to deep ties with the GAA and local community life. And we're joined now by a man with strong family connections to the pub. It is Father Harry Bohan. Harry, good to speak to you again. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Hello, Alan.
The pub in Feakle, the family pub, is on the market. Before we get into the pub and its history and the family connections and all of that, what's your feeling at seeing such a historic place enter a new chapter, but I guess leaving the Bohan chapter?
I'm not sure. There's a bit of sadness about it, because we were all born and reared there, and the place had a huge connection to the local community. And I heard someone saying the other day, we're all so busy now that we haven't time to talk. But I can tell you, growing up there, there was a lot of talk and a lot of good chat in that place down through the years. And it had very deep connections to the local community, the local townlands and so on. So there's a sadness, but your time moves on, and Seamus and Bernie built their own house when they got married, and Denise, Ciara and Aisling were born and reared there and loved the place as well. They would have very, very deep attachments as well to it, and I know that they are very sad that it's moving, that it's to be sold, but should it be, I suppose, that's Seamus and Bernie. Seamus ran the pub until COVID, and like a lot of other places, closed it then for COVID and never went back to open it, because Seamus himself we're all in our 80s now. Seamus is in his 80s, so am I, as was my late brother Michal before us, and my sister Anna. But all of us had great attachments to it. Like Michal and myself and Anna and Seamus were born and reared in that pub. And there's a sadness, but time moves on, and that's it. And they have not lived their own lives now. I think Ciara is particularly very, very sad that it's happening, because Denise and Ciara and Aisling used to spend their time working there whenever they were home on holidays. They're all married and they're all teachers now and living in elsewhere. So, but they have a huge attachment to the place and a huge sadness. But and it was a lovely. Seamus, of course, got the whole place done up, and to just a pub on its own. I remember the time when it was. By the way, that pub was originally Fitzgerald's. That was my grandparents, and it was then a pub, and it was a grocer shop, and it was a draper shop, all in one.
Okay.
So it was a fairly substantial business. In the middle of the community.
And Harry, how did the pub then progress through the Bohan ownership and through the generations, and what role did it and has it played in family life over the years?
Well, it was family run all the way, by the way, which in itself was good. In other words, a lot of pubs are managed now, but it was family run the whole way. So there was that meant that's special, because my mother especially, that inherited the pub, and her name was Fitzgerald, and she married my father, who was Michael Bohan, and my father came as a gardener to Feakle, and he went to live and work in Ennis, because he was a gardener in Ennis, and for years, because a guard couldn't live and serve in the place where the pub was in those years. But he was a great man, and came home and reared us there with my mother. he retired young in order to run the place with her. But I really only remember them running the place. My mother was born in 1900, so that shows you that that whole century, the 20th century, which was my mother that was very much part of the place, and herself and my father that ran the place during those years.
Yeah, I mean, and with that, I mean, the photos in the pub dating back over a century, so a lot of story and history there, and I suppose chronicling your family history and the history of the community there. Obviously, with yourself and others, and just given the locality it's in, it's steeped in GAA history. How important was Bohan's pub to the sporting life of Feakle?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, there was a lot of hurling done in that pub. Indeed, even first of all, could I just say, between the 30s and 40s, Feakle won 5 senior championships. It was the place for a lot. I used to always say my heroes when I was growing up in Feakle, in that pub, where my heroes used to come in there, and I used to meet them and adore them, of course. And they were the fellas who played in that team to all of those years. And of course that team meant an awful lot to the community. So in other words, it was hurling. There was an odd fella who had no interest in hurling, would nearly come in for a pint, but when he'd hear the hurling would go on and on, that he'd go to some other pub. By the way, could I just say this as well about Feakle and the pub, that when I grew up there was 2 priests in Feakle. There was a doctor, there was 6 gardeners, and there was a creamery. Oh, there's none of them there now. But I want to say this, I'm absolutely very proud of Feakle, the way it has progressed. And as Dennis Purcell said to me recently, that Feakle is playing way above its size. I was told the other day that there were 65 young people between 5 and 15 in the hurling field recently between Feakle and Killanena training. So, in other words, the hurling thing was very much, and the hurlers even down to this day would have been calling there, or down certainly to the time it closed, would have called there for the chat. And then all of us, Seamus, or Michal, myself and Seamus, all hurled with Feakle. So it was a place where there was a lot, and we were in a famous county final as well when I was hurling there. And so it was deep. There was a huge attachment to hurling.
Harry, with a pub of this type, you have said earlier on, it is sad, but a sign of the times and so on. But do you think there's still a future for family-run pubs in rural communities, or are we in danger of losing something important as traditional pubs like your family's one close or change hands?
Well, Alan, you'll have to put your thumb on it. The danger of losing something important, and that was the chat alone. I mean, people are saying now that, as I said earlier, that people have got very busy now, and they don't have any time, and they don't have any time for the chat. People used to come to our place, maybe for the pint, but very often for the chat. And so it had a huge, that kind of pub. And of course, the fact that it was family run was also hugely important. The question you asked, is there a future for them? Sure, unfortunately, I see in the bridge now, which has now grown to have a few thousand, and it's grown enormously. There are less pubs in the bridge now than there was in the times I was talking about.
Yeah, which I guess maybe that says more about our changing relationship with the drink or with socialising, which I suppose...
Well, I'd say 2 things. One, people buy the drink now and take it home. That seems to be the practice. that the other thing is that I'd say that like I would have remembered my mother ran the pub herself because my father was in Ennis and coming home to run it in his free time. But if my mother, I used to say, my mother would spot a row nearly a day before it happened. She knew everyone.
She's an intuition.
Exactly. I tell you this funny story? I think the people themselves wouldn't mind. There was a man in Feakle used to come in called Goose Tobin. He'd come to our pub, and he'd sometimes, when he had a few kids, he'd bring them with him. But he was well known after a few pints that he'd stopped the row, or stopped some kind of an argument anyhow. But my mother said to him one day, she spotted him with the row coming. She said, "Be off now, Goose Tobin," she said, "and bring your goslings with you." And I heard her. I was in the kitchen, and I heard her, and I said, "God, you'll get jailed for that now if you said it." And she said, "Not at all. He'll be back tonight." And of course, there was that kind of close relationship between people.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on what happens with the pub next, Harry? Depending, it'll change hands, but obviously whoever, when someone buys something, they want to kind of put their own stamp on it. But would you be keen that they kind of keep as much of Bones in its original state as possible, because it has a lot of history attached to it? That is a selling point, that maybe the new owners will acknowledge that and keep some of that going.
Alan, that's good. I would like to think so, but there's now 3 pubs in Feakle. There was 6 in it when I was growing up. I'd like to think of it. There's a lot of history there. I'll tell you, my grandfather lost his walk, and my grandfather was a rebel, and I suppose he was, for the time, the IRA of the time, he was very much part of it. And the tans, when I actually remember, and I don't know why they left them, but there were 2 bullet holes. There was a bullet hole in the shop window. They left it there. And also, in the room that my grandfather used to sleep in, there was another. The tans came to shoot him there on a few occasions. So there was that kind of history as well. And I'd love to think that somebody who gets it, I know that some of the girls, like Clare, I know especially, has a very emotional attachment to it. And I'd like to think that it isn't lost. That's all what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, look, hopefully whoever takes it on will keep something of Bowen's Pub, as many know and love it, as a going concern. But Harry, it is the end of an era, but as you acknowledged at the outset, that's what happens. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope you're keeping well, and look forward to having you on again. But for the moment, thank you very much.
Alan, thanks a lot.